George Foreman was born on 10th of January 1949 in Marshall, Texas. After a troubled youth, Foreman settled down and took up boxing and American football, in the end deciding that boxing was the sport for him. Foreman had his first amateur bout in January 1967 and won for first round knockout, quickly becoming well known for his punching power. Only 20 months after this, Foreman won gold at the Olympic Games in Mexico City. Unsurprisingly, he won the final by knockout. Foreman turned professional the year after and fought 13 times in 1969 alone, and after amassing a record of 37 wins, 0 draws and 0 losses, Foreman rose to become the #1 contender. He was primed to take on the similarly undefeated current champion, Smoking Joe Frazier. Frazier went into the bout the favourite, and his left hook was feared. Foreman in his later years stated that Frazier was the only fighter he'd ever been afraid of. Everyone was stunned though, as Foreman's power was too much, knocking Frazier down 6 times on his way to becoming heavyweight champion of the world. Foreman defended the belt twice, including a 2-round demolition of Ken Norton, before coming to a career-defining moment. Foreman came up against a resurgent Muhammad Ali in 1974 in Ali's first title fight since losing to Joe Frazier in 1971. Fought in Zaire, this fight was known as the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali was a 4-1 underdog for this fight, but employed a rope-a-dope tactic, allowing Foreman to swing for him with barrages of punches until he was finally tired out. Ali was then able to capitalise and knock out Foreman to regain the world title. Foreman then had 5 more fights, including another win over Joe Frazier and an epic slugfest with Ron Lyle. Please check out the full fight if you ever get a chance. It's one of my favourite heavyweight fights. If you want to see 2 fighters swinging away looking for a knockout with no thought for their own defence, this is the fight for you. Maybe not one for the boxing purists out there.
Only 10 seconds left in the round. Now Foreman was staggered. Foreman was staggered by a Lyle left. Foreman goes down.
After this, Foreman lost a decision to Jimmy Young. After this fight, Foreman had what he described as a religious experience, which led him away from boxing. He retired at the age of 28 to become an ordained minister. This was the way that things stayed for the next 10 years, until to the shock of everyone, Foreman announced a comeback at the age of 38. Looking at this point like a completely different fighter, Foreman also changed the way he boxed. He now had a more controlled, methodical approach to his fight instead of searching for a knockout as soon as possible. On top of this, Foreman could still count on his tremendous knockout power when an opportunity was presented. Despite having his chances consistently written off, Foreman put together a string of 24 straight wins. My favourite fight from this period is a duel he had with Jerry Cooney, which includes what I'd say is the most nonchalant yet devastating knockout I've ever seen. This run of victories earned George a shot at the WBA, WBC and IBF champion Evander Holyfield. Despite brave effort, Foreman would lose by unanimous decision.
More punches from Foreman, and Holyfield absorbs it in the middle of the ring. And Foreman on the attack in the 7th round.
But watch him come back. He's blocking punches. He's letting George throw punches and miss them. A lot of bouncing off the gloves of Holyfield as he lands.
And now Holyfield coming on, and a strong left from Holyfield against Foreman. And a right. And Holyfield landing inside.
After 3 more wins, Foreman earned a shot at the WBO title against Tommy Morrison, and unfortunately again was outfought. And this seemed to be the end with regards to dreams of a world title, until Michael Moorer gave Foreman a chance to fight for his WBA, IBF and lineal titles. Now being 45, Foreman was given little chance of beating a champion almost 20 years younger than himself. Despite being way down on the scorecards, Foreman hit Moorer with a quick 1-2, which seemed to stun and back Moorer up. And then after that, a second 1-2 caught Moorer flush on the chin, and he was knocked down and counted out. George Foreman became the oldest ever heavyweight champion. He also became the oldest champion in any weight division until Bernard Hopkins overtook this record years later. 3 more fights followed, and despite relinquishing his WBA and IBF belts, he was still the lineal champion. This was lost to Shannon Briggs at the age of 48 in a bruising contest. Despite landing more punches, being up on the scorecards for the analysts at ringside, Foreman lost this fight via what was seen as a very controversial decision.
Fourth root-going performance in a row for Foreman. If we hear the bell for round 12, hasn't had a knockout since the Moorer fight. Maybe he doesn't need knockouts to keep winning.
This fight was a title eliminator and would have given Foreman the chance to take on Lennox Lewis had he been victorious.
Blood around the edges of Shannon Briggs' nose. Visible evidence of Foreman's 12th round attack. All Foreman now as Briggs backs up.
Despite retiring after this fight, the fight was lined up in 1999 against former champion Larry Holmes. This was scheduled for shortly after Foreman's 50th birthday. However, this fight fell through, as did another talked about bout for Foreman in 2004. He also called out Steven Seagal in 2017 for a one-off fight, which would have been an interesting yet bizarre encounter. George Foreman ended his career with a total of 81 fights, consisting of 76 wins, 5 losses, and a ridiculous 68 knockouts. He remains one of the greatest ever heavyweights, and one of my favourite boxers, for his power, strength, and determination.